What's up, Liron here. Today we're going to have a really interesting video. I'm going to show you a common mistake in watercolor painting, and then I'm going to tie it up into, I think, a more important concept that will help you improve your art in general. So let's get started. What's up, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in another video. And as I mentioned, today I'm going to show you a very common mistake that I see in watercolor painting. This is mainly done by people who were exposed to other types of painting, mainly oil and acrylic, and that is working with watercolor the way as if it was oil painting, okay? And that means working very slowly in small areas and filling it up slowly, and the result is very patchy. The washes are uneven and it feels very streaky. You can see the brush strokes. Now, again, I'm not here to tell you what style to paint, and if that's something you like and you're sure about that, go for it. But the way it appears many times is just as an inexperienced painting, and it's too bad because the solution is very, very easy in my opinion. And I just want to... I think when I wrap up this video, I will tie it up into the larger concept of using every medium the way it was meant to be used, okay? I'm going to talk about that near the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. I think it's a really important idea. But what I want to do now is show you a demonstration of this, real live demonstration step by step of how to not do it and how to do it. And you will see the solution is very, very simple. I'm going to use these two avocados to show you. Okay, so I'm going to do one that's the wrong way, then one that's the right way, and hopefully you will better understand how to approach this. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so I've got these two avocado drawings right here, and I'm going to show you using these the wrong way and the right way of doing this. Now let me show you just a moment the setup that I have here, because I'm going to zoom in and then you won't see everything. So I've got the paper towel here, the water cup right here. This is the Click and Go by Faber-Castell if you're curious, and then I've got the brush here. I'm going to use a very simple, I guess, green or something like this. I'm not going to overcomplicate the color aspect of this. But let's talk a bit about the mistake itself. So when I say mistake, there's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of things that go into this specific method of working, and so I'll do my best to explain. But this mistake basically means you're working with too small a brush on too large of a painting, and you're working really slowly and taking your time, and I'm gonna show you exactly what that ends up looking like. So you're working really slowly and filling the areas very slowly, and what happens is the result is unattractive, it's uneven, it doesn't look fresh and doesn't feel like watercolor, okay? It's very streaky, you can see the brush strokes, it's just not good. Now again, there is a word to be said about stylistic choice, but we're going to talk about that later on. Now I was looking for a brush that was really too small, but I couldn't find one because I'm really working just large. So this is size 12, so I'm going to work with the tip of the brush to mimic that way of working, okay? But generally I'm talking about, this is an 1/8 of a sheet, so if you'd be working with like a size 6 or size 4 or size 3 or 2 or 1, those are tiny brushes and it just doesn't work well for most people. So with that being said, let's just zoom in and I'm going to show you the wrong way of doing this. Okay, so I'm going to start and I want you to see this again real-time narrated by me. So let's begin here. I'm just gonna make a pool of paint and I'm gonna do something that most of the people that make this mistake don't do as well, and that is mix enough paint, but I'm gonna do that just for my own ease. And let's get started. I've got enough, I think it's sap green, some undersea green, just a bunch of green here. I don't really care about that. So what I see many people do is first they work with too dry of paint, and that prevents the wash from looking even. So I'm just going to grab some paint here and let's get started. And I'm just going to start filling in this avocado, and I may do a good job at it accidentally, so I hope I don't, but if I do, you will forgive me about that. So I'm working my way here really slowly. I have a tiny brush that can barely fill these areas in. You can see I'm messing with the paint a little too much, and I'm filling in the spaces. It's just like a coloring book, really. I'm gonna dry the brush a bit because I am using, I think, too wet a brush, so the effect won't be really noticeable. Now what a lot of the time happens is people overwork their wash as well. So it's like you go back and you keep adding more to it, and then you keep moving, and it's just It's not oils, it's watercolor painting, okay? I may cut some of this process just because I don't know how interesting it is to see all this streakiness. But here I go, and I'm working slowly, and I'm taking my time. And then I'm running out of water in my brush, but I keep filling in the spaces here. And let's move here onto the left. And I'm just working. It's just been such a long time. I don't really remember making this mistake as of recent, so maybe I'm not good enough at it. But you'll get to see hopefully some of that. So now I'm not pleased because some areas here don't have, you know, the some gaps that I left. So I'm going back and reworking these. Now this may not look terrible to you right now, but just wait and see how it comes together. So I'm gonna add a bit of this here, kind of like that, and I'm slowly filling in the area. Again, I may skip some of this if I don't want it to be too slow and boring, but in any case, yeah, I'm filling up the spaces, just like colored pencils, you know, working slowly. And I'm gonna zoom in for you in just a moment, and you'll even better see what the problem with this is. And let's say I even vary it a bit. I add a bit of yellow here, and kind of add a bit of yellow to that, but I missed a spot here, so I'm going back and fixing it, and here as well. And yeah, and I'm going over like that. And yeah, my paint is too dry. My wash is, I'm working with a tiny brush, filling in these big areas, and this is the result. And notice the streakiness. Okay, you can probably see this already. Now again, I'm gonna add a bit of a different paint here. Let's use some burnt sienna for the seed. Okay, and I'm going like this. A lot of the time I see another thing that people do is, and that is they go over the edges and then fill up the area like this. You see, and then I'm filling it the area inside, like making the contours first. And there are a few problems with that because these marks show later on, okay? And at this point I have to remind people that this isn't oil, but actually watercolor. And yeah, and here we go. And we've got the first wash, okay? So let me zoom in for you just so you can better see the details. So here is the final result of that endeavor. Now, I wouldn't say it's terrible, but notice how just there's so much unevenness to it. I even think the variation looks good, but you see there's a lot of streakiness to it. You can see that where I stopped and where it took me some time to continue. This edge dried completely, so you can see it. This part again dried completely, so nothing really merged together. And it's just not the best result you could achieve with this small item that's really fun to, you know, small subject that's really fun to paint. So what I think I'm gonna do now is show you a better way of doing this first wash, but then we'll go back to this one and I'll show you how you can still pull it off as a good painting, okay? So let's move on to the second one. Very good, so now I will finally show you the correct way of doing this. And first off, I have to prepare a lot of paint because I want to keep the paint very wet. I want to make sure that it's always wet, it's always flowing, and everything merges together nicely because it's the first wash and I want to make sure that it's all just connected. So another thing that I wanted to talk about was the actual values. And you know, you can try and achieve a lot of values in the first wash, but to be fair to the example, I didn't do that here on the previous example. You can't see it, but I didn't do it on the previous example, so I'm not going to do it now. I'm going to do just a kind of flat wash with very slight variation, okay? So now you can see my paint is much more wet, and I actually want it to be a little even more wet, okay? And I'm very aware of my edges. I'm not working with the paper tilted, okay? It's very very flat. So yeah, and then I'm using large brush strokes and making sure I'm not wasting too much time on areas I already visited or on you know, not doing many small marks like this. You see I missed a spot and I really easily filled it up. I'm gonna add maybe some variation to it, maybe a bit more yellow near the bottom. I'm very well aware of this edge and it's gonna dry and I don't have a lot of time to work on that, so I will be working rather fast on this part. and then I'm gonna jump to the other one. Now this is a little lighter, so maybe lighter and more yellow here. And I'm gonna quickly connect it. Now it may be a bit of a background here because this part started drying, but you see it's barely noticeable. In fact, because I worked fast, there aren't too many backgrounds of areas that already have dried and things like this. So now I'm filling in this little area here. Maybe I'll even use a bit of a pure yellow here just to have a bit more interest, and I can actually afford doing these variations because I'm working really fast. Okay, so if I would have worked ultra slowly, I wouldn't have time to do all of that. And you can see very wet wash. There's a shadow going through here that I didn't draw, but that's fine. And finally, let's do the small avocado seed here. I'm gonna use same level of wetness of burnt sienna, or at least try, and you can see what that looks like. Everything is well merged together, very even, very nice, and we're gonna give this a few moments to dry. But I already want to zoom out a bit and show you a comparison of the two results. Now I want you to notice how fast this result dried because I was using too dry a paint and working slowly, so I took more time with the wash and it ended up drying while I'm working on it. This one is still wet. I zoomed out, I moved some stuff around, it's still wet. I could still work with that. I could even grab a bit of, you know, the burnt sienna I just used and actually darken these areas and it will still blend nicely together. Okay, and that happens because I used very wet washes that allow me more time to work on them. Okay, so this is, I think, the crux of this issue. Now what I want to do is I will allow this a few moments to dry, and then we're going to revisit this example, and I'm going to show you how you can pull this together and make a painting, even though we did the first wash at least not in my favorite way, because once you add the second wash, it really is forgiving with the mistakes you did in the first one. As long as you didn't mess it up too bad, you can still fix it. Okay, and again, there is a word to be said about stylistic choice. If you want this to be your style, very streaky and like that, then that's your choice, but just make sure you don't do it out of a place of low awareness, of not being aware that there's a better way. Okay, that's my whole point with this video. So let's allow it some time to dry, and we're gonna pull this into a finalized painting that works really well. So now let me show you how, by just adding an additional wash to that, and making sure you do that one properly, it can really create a correction of the first, let's say, approach. Now, not to say again that the first approach is completely wrong, but just as a disclaimer, but I think there is a more efficient way to work with a medium, for example. So what I'm going to do now is I'm picking up a bit of a darker paint here, and I'm going to start working on the right side section. Still very wet, okay? You still want the paint to be quite wet, even when you're choosing a darker mixture. Because you still want it to flow, especially in the second layer, where things still are quite, let's say, what would you say, visible. Okay, so I'm gonna shade really strongly here around this one. Now I do have this edge I need to take care of, so I'm gonna dry and clean the brush a bit, and I'm just gonna blend some of this edge right here. And it looks like it's very well blended in this area, maybe a bit harsher in some others. And I'm gonna just make my way down here. Now here things become very dark. All of this right side is significantly dark. So I'm just gonna add a bit more, and because I'm working with a very wet paint, I still have time to react and to add some more. Now, this area is dark as well, so I'm just going to connect the two. Let's add a bit more of sap green down here. And to darken it, I'm actually adding a bit of carbazole violet. Sorry that you can't see this because it's all up here. Carbazole violet, because that really helps darken things up. And I'm just treating this as one large area, okay? So like that. And again, I may not have the most accurate brush work, but as long as I'm generally accurate, let's say to some extent, that's enough. By the way, sorry that my speech is a bit maybe different from what you're used to, because again, I'm doing this real time and I'm not used to doing things real time. I'm usually doing my tutorials, you know, I'm doing the painting and then I'm recording a narration or voiceover, if you will. So yeah, so now I'm really treating this as just one area. I could push things a little more even in this part, so I'm gonna grab a bunch of very thick paint and add this hint of a stronger shadow under that part of the avocado, and that way it will create a slight separation. But now you see how beautiful that is. Now I do want to blend some of that edge that I missed, okay, and I think it still blends really well. Now you still can see the patchiness from the previous layer, but it's not going to ruin or spoil our fun, because you see here things still are working in our favor. Now I'm going to add a bit of a thin green, this is more of a phthalo green, circle around this avocado piece, this half of avocado, like this. I can even allow this to blend a bit into this part, still wet enough, and I may turn this into a bit of a more gentle transition. It's actually funny, when I look at the avocado, it looks almost the same color as a phthalo green, sorry. And now the one thing that will really make this look really good is taking care of that seed. So I'm just going to start by adding shadow to its right side, like so. And there are different areas. It's basically, you know what, I'm going to correct myself. It's all darker, so I'm just going to add a darker layer to everything here, like this. It should be even darker, so I'm just going to push it a little more here in the lightest area. Now here I'm going to make the transition to the darker spot, so that I want to really be dark. I'm going to grab also a bit of that violet here, just to mimic what's happening here, color-wise. And there we go, a bit of this. Now there is a very gentle shadow here, and I'll try and get it without it being too dominant. And it's cast by the seed itself, so it's kind of like this, I guess. And I'm wondering if I should push, I think I should push the values a little darker yet. Okay, so in this, around this edge of the seed. And you can see how just by adding that second layer, it kind of pulls things a bit together and makes them still look good, even though the first wash was very streaky and very, you know, you can see all of the lines, and it still looks really good in my opinion. What I think I want to do is darken this exterior a bit more, like this, and then I'm gonna blend that in, all of it, because everything here is gradual in this area. Now I accidentally made these two touch, and then some of the seed bled into the wet area, but you know, you just clean the brush and wipe it almost dry, and then you can lift that right back up. Okay, now this area again should also be darker, so I'm just gonna close that gap, and I think I'll add a very gentle shadow like this. And this one is done mainly, so now we can move on to the next one, and I'm gonna do the exact same thing. And here I'm going to do again, same thing, there is nothing to do differently, because the way I just did it now is the way I would naturally do it. Now with the second wash, this is something I didn't mention because I was emphasizing working fast so much. You do want to be a little more patient. So what I could do now is try and observe the values a little more carefully and be more accurate on the first go. So this area is very, very dark once again. There's also the texture of the avocado, but I don't mess around too much with the texture. I could add a bit of abstract transitions like this. Now here we become a little more green, but still quite dark around the top, so I'm going to do that like this. There is even a hint of blue on the left. Very interesting. I'm not sure what it's reflected by or how that occurs. There's so much going on when it comes to light and shadow that it's really really an entire world of its own. By the way, if you want to learn about light and shadow or how to draw like I do, definitely check out my beginner drawing courses on my website. I will put the links to everything in the description box, so you can visit those. I think a lot of people could benefit from those. Again, drawing is, in my opinion at least, an important part of the process. You could make lovely paintings without knowledge of drawing, but it really helps. So in any case, now I'm gonna choose this bit of green from earlier, just because sometimes I make really random color choices and then I don't know how to explain why I chose the color I chose to. And funny enough, as watercolor has it, you know, it always throws curveballs at you. I ended up liking the previous streaky version a little more. That happens as well. It's like the version that was meant to show you how not to do it ended up being my favorite. And I think I did a better job with the second layer there as well. So, you know, that happens as well. And it's like a happy accident, really, in that regard. So I'm going to connect this here. But again, as long as my values are going to be on point in this one as well, it's still going to look good. Okay, so I'm not too worried about that. Now, while this is wet, this time I'm not going to make the same mistake. I'm going to use some of that more phthalo-ish green to connect it to this side of things. I did a bit of a... went a little bit overboard with this area, so like this. Close it up like that. There's a hair. And close it up like this. And I do think the colors for this one work a little better. So let's blend that right into the yellow. And now I'm going to start working on the seed in the middle. So it is, again, darker than this area, for example. So I'm darkening everything up, but maybe, you know what, I think I exaggerated just a bit. So I'm going to lift some of that back up. Continue, and on the right it really becomes much darker, so we're going to use both the violet and the burnt sienna here. And it's just really about having fun with the paint. Ultimately, you know, you just want to enjoy it and make sure that you give yourself time to really be immersed in the process, because for the longest time I would paint and it would be so hard for me to actually enjoy it because I was taking it so seriously. But you do want to make sure that you enjoy it. Now I'm gonna darken this area again because there was a gentle shadow like this. Now this should be much darker. I messed it up in this one actually, so I'm just gonna add a bit more paint, and hopefully it's still wet enough just so that it can take that extra paint and not look too weird. And there we go. I could add that darker streak right here that you saw earlier. And I'm actually gonna do just that to make this very gentle separation between the two parts, the two avocados. And I think with that being said, we're really done with this. Let me zoom out and I will show you both final results. Okie doke, so we are done here. This is still drying, it's still a bit wet. You can see a very gentle sheen. Funny enough, I like both results. I like this one even a little better. I think I was a bit more on point with the values. Here it's a bit more of a... I think it was flattened a bit, but I could actually lift. You know what, I'm not going to touch that. I don't want to ruin it. But in any case, we have these two. I think the colors work better here. I think the values work a little better here. And you can see how even if you messed up the first wash, you can still fix things. Nothing is lost in watercolor. There's a lot you can do later on to fix it. I would just put an emphasis on the first wash on having fun, allowing the paint to flow very freely and be very well mixed and gentle in the transitions. And this is it. As long as you do that, you know, mix enough paint, keep it wet enough, work with a large enough brush, don't exaggerate. I would probably work with a larger brush for these, if I'm being frank. Maybe one that has a bit more spread to the hairs. But in any case, yeah, this really goes to show you, again, what I think is the wrong way of doing the first wash and then the right way. Nothing is lost, and again, there is the matter of stylistic choice. If you prefer the streaky look, then definitely go for it. Just make sure you don't do that out of weakness, but rather out of choice. And this is it. I hope you enjoyed this demo. Let's wrap up the video. So this is it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this demo. Now, I just want to talk a bit about using every medium the way it was meant to be used. Okay, so there is a certain way of painting with watercolor. There's a certain way and technique and approach for painting with acrylics, and there's a certain technique for painting with oils and gouache, and every medium is a little different. There is the way that is the more traditional way, and usually it is the correct way of approaching a medium. For example, watercolor allows for very good blending and a very good way of creating a gradation. It's very gentle and it can do a lot in that sense. So I think the smart move would be to take advantage of that. Okay, oils on the other hand really allow you to go back into areas, add the highlights. The work order is different. You're starting from dark to light or from medium, and then you break outside to the dark and the light. And making use of that is a wise decision. Now, there is a word to be said about style. So if you like to use watercolor straight out of the tube, for example, that's a very extreme example, but I heard some people do that, and it's like almost like oil paint because it's very thick, or maybe I would say like gouache, because that's gouache basically, then that's fine if that's your stylistic choice. But I just want everyone to make sure that you're not doing that as a crutch or because that's the only way you know. Because once you use the medium the way it's meant to be used, you find a really open world of opportunities and chances to really take advantage of the uniqueness of, for example, watercolor. Okay, both results you can see it's just one result doesn't use the medium the best way it could. Okay, now you could say I love that style, and that's perfectly fine, but I would say that when starting, especially when working with a new medium after you're used to something else, there's a lot of unlearning taking place. You need to really figure out how you would now start working fresh with this new one. Now, there are a lot of advantages to starting with a new medium because you're more free and your approach many times is clean because the medium handles and behaves differently. So that's an advantage to that. But I just want to make sure that if you're making a transition, you don't just bring with you all of your approach and technique and things you used to do, and you're actually figuring out how to use the new medium at hand. Okay, so this is it. I hope you enjoyed this demo, and I hope it makes it clearer why this is, in my opinion, the better way of doing this. But again, you have your way, I have my way, my own way. Let me know what you think in a comment below about this. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Is this a mistake that you've seen with others, or maybe you are doing or have been doing yourself? I'm really curious to hear about that, and maybe it's your style and it's the way you want to work. So let me know that too in a comment below. I'm really open to all of these ideas and it really interests me. And this is it. Thanks once again for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you still haven't, hit the bell button to receive notifications of new videos. Check out my beginner's drawing course if you want to learn how to draw. Like this, it's not about painting, it's about drawing, but still, drawing is like the basis for painting, so it's still a very important skill. My podcast, again, my Instagram if you want to see works in progress, things like this. For example, I'm shooting this video now, but the updates on Instagram are immediate. You can see them in my story. So yeah, this is it. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will talk to you again in another vid real soon.